Oh,
Hi, hello.
good. Okay.
Good. I guess it's the typical good morning, good afternoon, and good night.
Hi
It's
ho.
hi. We we are waiting, or we're expecting a bit over 20 people to join, so I think we should wait a little bit more before we start. At least 1 or 2 more minutes. For some of us, it's early in the morning, and for some of us, it's rather late in the day. Yeah, I guess we can just go ahead and see if other people join. Yeah, during the course of this 1 hour, 1.5 hours. Um, may I invite you to turn on your camera if you can, if you're okay with that? I think it makes it a bit, yeah, more personal and more. Hi, hello everybody. Thank you. Hi. Hello. So hello and thank you for taking the time, making the time to join us today. Um, for those who don't know me, I'm Claudette Spiteri. I'm the project manager of IW Learn. I believe I met some of you in Uruguay 2 months ago. And yeah, what we thought with the webinar today, we thought very much to continue the discussions that we had initiated in Uruguay, particularly through the pre-conference workshop that was dedicated to SIDS. As you might recall, one of the reasons why IW Learn is organizing these activities is because in this phase of IW Learn, for the first time, one of the components is dedicated to SIDS, and therefore we have, let's say, the resources and also the objectives to organize a number of SIDS-specific activities, including twinning program that is aiming to bring SIDS together, the development of a SIDS hub as part of the IW Learn website, and a number of capacity strengthening activities, for instance, through regional training workshops. So the objectives of today, what we thought of today, is to present the outcomes of the pre-conference workshop, at the IWC, that was also co-organized with UNEP Cartagena, with Laverne. And to also start thinking of this, what we're calling the intra-regional workshops that we would like to take to plan for 2025 for next year. But also to understand better what the needs are, what the capacity and training needs are, specifically in Caribbean and Pacific region, because that's where we intend to start with these regional workshops on the shorter term. So today we have, let's say, two components. One component is to reflect on the outcomes of the recent workshop, and then the second part more forward looking on the next steps. Before we start, we had prepared two poll questions. I'm not sure if it's really needed a poll in this case. With this amount of people, we can even just turn on the microphone and come in. You want to launch the question so we can see the questions. We would like to know where you're connecting from with this specific time. We would think there would be more people from Caribbean and potentially also Pacific, and not so many people from Africa because it will be late in the evening. So I invite you to just stick where you're coming from, connecting from, and also just to know whether you attended the pre-conference workshop in Uruguay.
So hi, I'm Travis Sinclair, connecting from Barbados. I know I did not attend the workshop, and I blame Laverne for that.
Okay. Eric?
Yes,
Camila,
Sonia.
we need to. Okay, yeah.
Hello, my name is Eric Harchi. I'm with the Stanford Center for Ocean Solutions, based in Palo Alto, California. I am the project manager for the GEF7 IWP on the Micronesia Challenge 2030. And yes, I did attend in Uruguay, and I attended the pre-conference meetings as well. Hello.
Laura?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Laura Garcia. I represent the Havana field office, the focal point in SIDS. I did not attend it in the meeting in Uruguay, but I'm glad to share with you this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rosanna?
Sure. So I'm Rosanna. I'm in the water team at FAO's Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. I'm based in Wellington in New Zealand. And so we're the GEF implementing agency for the Pacific IW project. I was hoping that we'd be joined by colleagues from SPC today, the executing agency. Hopefully they'll join a bit later. And I wasn't in Uruguay.
Thank you. Chris?
Hi, good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Chris Corbin, coordinator of the UNEP Cartagena Convention Secretariat, which of course, as you know, is a partner in this effort, but also a co-executing agency for a number of GEF IW projects. I wasn't there in Uruguay. I was happily able to pass on the baton to my good colleague, Laverne. So I'm here sort of supporting, and if there's anything from a policy perspective we need to take forward, I'd be very happy to, and thanks everyone for joining. Over.
Thank you, Chris. Asha?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling out of Trinidad. Well, joining the meeting out of Trinidad. Yes, I was in Uruguay as a presenter, and I'm hoping today to present almost a similar presentation that I've made in Uruguay.
Yeah,
I'll take my camera off here on. Travis and all the others, lovely to see you and lovely to meet all the others as well.
Thank you. Sonia, I don't know if you're able to talk, but
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I thought we were going to do it in the chat. So hi, everyone. My name is Sonia Gautreau. I'm based in Canada, but I work on the UNDP GEF Pro-Caribe Plus project, which is an initiative for the wider Caribbean region. And I was in Uruguay and also attended the SIDS workshop. Nice to see everyone.
Yeah. Same here. Maria Camila?
Hello, I'm Maria Camila. I am with the IWC Learn team. I support in communications and knowledge management. And I was also doing the workshop in Uruguay, supporting the SIDS.
Okay. And hi, I'm Laverne Walker. I am the Program Management Officer for Marine Pollution at the Cartagena Convention Secretariat, and I am actually supporting. I'm working. Well, we're working with UNESCO IW Learn to support some elements of the the SIDS component under their project. And as a result of that, we also helped facilitate the workshop in Uruguay. So yes, I was in Uruguay at the workshop. So I think, did I miss anyone? I think it's a small group at the moment. So that's it for us. And Claudette, do we move forward? Okay, so Camila? Oh, we have a new person coming in. Simona, do you want to introduce yourself and where you're calling in from, and were you at the SIDS conference in pre-workshop conference in Uruguay, if you are able to talk? Okay. Whilst we wait for her, Camila, you want to share the presentation? Thank you. Okay, so thank you everyone. This is very, very short. So the pre-workshop conference, this is just an overview of the workshop that took place on the Saturday before the IWC10 conference. And next slide, please. It took place in Montevideo in Uruguay. Next slide, please. There were approximately 30 participants at the meeting, and they represented project managers, country representative, intergovernmental organizations, NGOs, and we had representation from the African, Caribbean, and Pacific SIDS. So next slide. I should have done the meeting objectives. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we spoke about were how we, no, go back, Maria Camila. Yes. Some of the things that we spoke about was how we, some of the ideas we could bring forth to the JEF for consideration under the new JEF program. And things we looked at was the new SIDS program, the Antigua and Barbuda Action for SIDS. And some of the things that were given consideration were the focus by SIDS that was placed on the sustainable ocean-based economies. These are actually priorities that came out of ABAS and are related to some of the JEF focal areas or could be integrated into JEF focal areas. Achieving gender equality, empower youth, and leave no one behind. Another priority area that was identified was the focus on integrated water resources management, of course, climate change, and again, the conserve and sustainably use the oceans, as well as conserve and restore and sustainably use biodiversity. So it was just a discussion of this, and we found that a lot of the priorities that were outlined under the Samoa pathway still held true and were also even taken further with this new SIDS program of action through ABAS. Next slide, please. As part of the workshop, we broke into three thematic groups, and just very briefly, I think people here here from both the blue economy and the blue carbon group. So good to see, Sonia. You could see a picture of yourself. So they also discuss some of the challenges and the successes and some recommendations moving forward that the JEF may wish to give consideration to. So the blue carbon thematic group, they suggested that there may be a need to focus more on small scale and multi-state projects, prioritizing smaller community-driven projects and multi-state collaborations that ensure greater inclusivity and local relevance. There were also suggestions for the adoption of innovative finances for adaptation and ecosystem benefits, focusing on investigating new financing models that can support not only carbon sequestration, but also broader ecosystem services such as adaptation and biodiversity conservation. So moving forward to the Blue Economy working group, okay. Next slide, please. Maria Camila, can you share the link with Isabel? She said she's trying to join and she cannot join. Please, if possible. The Blue Economy working group also, thematic group came up with some recommendations. Some of the things that they spoke of were developing new models for long-term sustainable finance. Again, the finance topic came up. And there were examples from people that were representing the African region, and they said this could come through encouraging blended finance. And the example they used were green banks model piloted by the African Development Bank in Africa. They also suggested increasing the proportion of funding for continuous capacity development, including across different stakeholder groups, NGOs, academia, etc. Next slide, please. And then the other thematic group that we had was on source to sea. And some of the recommendations that came out were increasing tangible. They focused a lot on how to increase the benefits to communities to result in the sustainability of the project output. So it was felt that more focus needs to be placed on the communities that benefit from the projects. And there was also some suggestion that there was not enough focus being placed on increasing capacity to government agencies, and there should be increased focus on that to ensure long-term institutional capacity building. There is a meeting report that is being finalized, and these and more of the recommendations that came out of the workshop would be available through the meeting report. I'm assuming through IW Learn once that is done, but these are just some of the suggestions that came out. In relation to what other things were discussed, please, next slide. We did discuss the SIDS twinning portal, which Claudette alluded to in her introductory remarks. There was also discussions regarding the knowledge gaps and priorities for development of a training strategy. And I think we will hear a little further on this from Asha in the next presentation. Priority needs, again, for regional and interregional training workshops. So they were breakout groups where in the afternoon session where these were discussed, and the results of the survey that we filled out, Asha will present this and we did have discussions on an IW Learn SIDS hub, and there was a lot of discussion about this, with many people suggesting that they may not be that actually developing a new SIDS hub may not necessarily be the most sustainable thing to do, because there were a number of hubs already existing, and suggestions were made for a hub of hubs, basically a hub that will link a hub that would link to other SIDS related hub, and where people could come and place suggestions, recommendations, etc. So these were some of the recommendations that came out of the meeting, and I did not necessarily go in detail of these other topics, because we understand that as part of the agenda they're going to be discussed during this and presented during this webinar. So I'm going to pause here and actually ask for those who did attend the workshop if they have any reflections from this workshop that took place during the pre-IWC conference. It was the first time that SIDS were on the agenda. Did they think that it was a useful workshop? Did they think that it was engaging, etc.? So I invite those of you who were there, don't let me call you to say a few words on that. Over. So please feel free to take the floor. We were a small group. Otherwise, I will have to volunteer people. Okay, Sonia, you know I'm going to volunteer you.
I was scared you were going to do that, Laverne.
Yes, so you knew you should have gone ahead and did not allow me.
Oh my God, it's like I think I have like brain loss, like a memory loss. I almost forgot what we did at the workshop, but your inputs were refreshing my memory. I did find like I participated in this small group on blue carbon, and I learned quite a bit from some of the colleagues that were there. So I think that was useful, and it's also, I think, a new upcoming topic for SIDS. Although there's like, there's also a consideration that maybe not all of the SIDS would have like adequate blue carbon reserves. But anyways, it's still like nonetheless like I think an interesting topic. And I mean, was not discussed in depth during the workshop, but I'm interested in knowing more about the twinning portal. So I'll leave it at that because
Okay. I think I lost you at the end. But thank you, Sonia. Eric, I don't know if you have any reflections from the meeting, from the workshop.
Sure. So admittedly, I attended the project management portion and not the small and developing states portion. So most of my reflections are based on what we discussed after at the conference, and then also from what you just shared. I'll also just echo the fact that I have been really interested in my partners in Pompeii that attended the session in Montevideo, noted the interest in long-term financing opportunities, whether it's blended finance or others. That's a key area of interest for our partners in the Micronesia Challenge. And so I'm interested to dive into more detail on that. And I'll also echo the twinning portal is of increased interest based on the opportunity for lesson transfer amongst projects that are similar to ones that we're working on.
So, Isabel, I saw you joined in. I don't know if you have, well, I noticed that a few other people joined in, but Isabel, I don't know if you have any reflections from the workshop in Uruguay, and if you also want to introduce yourself. I've already said that you were there, but I know you're on mission right now, so I don't know if you can talk, but over to you. Okay. No? All right. We're not, I don't know if you're muted, but we're not hearing you at the moment. So I don't know if I missed anyone else that came in late. Since we're a small group, you may wish to introduce yourself, say what region you're calling in from, and also if you were in Uruguay. So Raymond, if you can.
Yep.
Okay.
Hello, greetings, Talofalava. My name is Raymond Schuster, and I attended the meeting in Uruguay on behalf of the Pacific community here in the Pacific. Thank you very much.
Okay, and Raymond, do you have any reflections from the workshop in Uruguay? Did you find it useful? Did you learn anything? Is there things that could be improved, etc.?
Yes, so the workshop was very, it was great. I didn't actually attend similarly to Eric, I attended the project management. But in terms of just previous discussions with colleagues, I am interested to learn more or dive into the SIDS twinning portal.
Okay, thank you. And Andreas, to introduce yourself.
Yes, so good morning, everyone. Good evening. It's morning here in Fiji. My name is Andreas. I'm with SPC as well, same as Raymond. Good to see a few people from Uruguay. Again, with SPC, so we work across the whole Pacific region, in 22 Pacific SIDS, and we had a few preliminary discussions with Claudette and Constantina and a few others there about possibilities to to engage with other SIDS regions, knowledge exchange opportunities, twinning opportunities, for lessons learned and exchange of experiences. So we'd be definitely keen to explore what's possible, and hopefully today, some of this information can be shared with the participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andreas, for your input, which is welcomed. So now, and thanks for those who were there. Okay, thank you, Isabel. Appreciate it. So I will now like to invite to continue the presentations Dr. Asha Singh, who is a consultant with IW Learn, and she will be presenting some of the findings of the consultancy outputs, including the SIDS knowledge gaps and needs survey administered during the workshop. So Asha, over to you.
Thank you, Laverne. And while I wait for the presentation to come up, I'm just going to give a background to this presentation today so you get a holistic picture. I was asked by the IW Learn portfolio to support some of their work. And in particular, the IW portfolio, they had 3 products that they asked me to engage with. That is, one is their SIDS twinning program. 2, a SIDS twofold assessment to inform their IW SIDS hub, and also the overall training strategy. Now, the last one, this is also being executed by another consultancy, and I'm also, so the 2 consultancy hoping to synergize in that product 3. Now, in order for me to support the products, there are a number of products that I had to produce in realization of these larger products. So one of them is the Jeff financial flows to SIDS. And for that, we would have looked at all the active products in all the SIDS across the world. And we looked at that from Jeff cycle 5 to cycle 8. Currently, cycle 8 is still ongoing, which will be completed in 2026. In addition, I've also compiled an inventory of information, knowledge material, databases, information and knowledge material, specifically regarding SIDS. I will talk about that. Isabel, you could just hold the slides. So there's an inventory of all the SIDS material that we could find in open source. Then, in addition, I've also developed an inventory of all the available hubs, and I'll talk a little bit about that in this presentation. And fourthly, the package was a stakeholder-driven assessment, and this was done via survey, a larger survey to the Jeff portfolio that is across the portfolio, but also part of that survey was customized for small island states. So I'll present those findings that are relevant to small island states. And also in Uruguay, when I was there, we did a small survey as well, and I'll present those. Hoping that this will give you, there's a lot of information, but what we have done, given that I have only 15 minutes, I've taken out a salient one, but there is a larger report that accompanies this presentation here that is available. So let me start. I'll start to talk a little bit about the financial flows. And you would see here in this slide, these were mapped, and you will see the AIS region, the Caribbean region, and the Pacific region, where we looked at all the small states. And we mapped the financial flow. That is the number of projects in this slide here, number of projects on the various thematic areas. You would see that they're the single focus thematic areas, for example, biodiversity, and then the combination of biodiversity. Same for chemicals, international waters, climate change, and land degradation. So in total, there are 417 active projects for small island states. And based on our analysis, climate change as a focal area has the highest proportion of the projects, followed by biodiversity, land degradation, international waters, respectively. However, when you look at the proportion, that is a multi-team project, biodiversity inclusion is the most significant one. Next slide, please. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about funding here. And one of the things that I thought that will be useful to our partners in the SIDS region is how is it that the global environmental facility financing is flowing into these regions. And what we have found, for example, and here you would see the allocation, use GEF cycle 5, 6, 7, and of course 8 is still ongoing. In GEF cycle 5, the overall allocation of GEF was $4.24 billion. In cycle 6, it was $4.3 billion. In cycle 7, it was 4.5. And this current cycle, the allocation is $5.33 billion. And these are all US dollars. Now, in cycle 5, 8.5% of that money went to small island states. This is the global SIDS. In cycle 6, 16.4. Cycle 7, 35.5, with the AIS region capturing a higher amount. And also in 8, which was 8.5 so far. Okay. Next slide, please. Right. So I'm just going to shift focus now. So those are the two on the financial flow. Let's talk a little bit about the inventory, what we are seeing. So far, we have collected about 136 pieces of information that is related to SIDS. A total, what we find in the literature on climate change is specifically high. And here you have a breakdown of the various thematic areas of GEF and how is it that we are seeing the resource material. So for example, with climate change, the AIS region is relatively low compared to, say, the Caribbean region and the Pacific region. And you would see the word SIDS here. This is literature that we would have found that speak globally to SIDS. Next slide, please. Good. And now I want to talk a little bit about the information hub. I know that this is one of the topics that we'll be discussing this afternoon's presentation. Okay, so there are 136 platforms that we found in the repository, and there are data and information. And what we have done in these I'm sorry if you're hearing a little noise. My daughter trying to get her away. Yes, so in the 136 entries that we have found, we have categorized them. Now, the developer of these hubs are what we would call these information sites. Some of them would refer to as a biodiversity hub, a knowledge hub, a hub alone, a library, a resource. So what we have done, we have further categorized those into knowledge hub, databases, libraries, and resources. And here you would have seen the breakdown by region. Knowledge hub remains quite the highest one. Now, worldwide, including SIDS, account for 28 of the platforms. That is SIDS. The AIS region 7, the Caribbean region ranked the highest with 38, and the Pacific region with 37. And the global SIDS would have been about 28. Next slide, please. Okay. Now here I want to talk a little bit about the stakeholder needs assessment. And again, we have just pulled out a salient one that is very relevant to this meeting this afternoon. Now, this is what the respondents that we would have gotten overall as to how is it that they see the use of these various training material that is currently being offered by the IW Learn. How is it that they use it? That is a level of priority that is given to incorporating these into their program of work, the extent to which each is needed, in their program work, they have ranked those, and then the frequency of the use. And if you look at the highlighted one, you would see what are the highs. So for example, let's take marine spatial planning. The level of marine spatial planning is given a high priority in their work. If we continue straight across with 37, but they say that it's much needed in terms of their work program. So that means they're asking for more training. And then the frequency by usage would be about 37. So this provides a synopsis as to how is it the respondents would have responded when we ask about a training material. Next slide, please. Right. So here we ask specifically for SIDS. Now, these are all training materials that are not customized for SIDS. So we asked the respondents, can you tell us out of those that was listed in the previous slide, which are the ones that you find that you would like to be customized from a SIDS context? And here we have the respondents with sustainable financing being the highest, introduction to global environmental facility, something that's customized for SIDS, data and information, and communication. And you also have the others like marine spatial planning, which has had one respondent, ocean governance, local communities, etc. Next slide. Right. So now I'm gonna shift to the outcomes from the small survey that I alluded to that we undertook in Uruguay. When we ask about ranking the criticalness of these various issues in the region, access into financing are very critical. Coordination was mentioned as very critical for them to function. Human capacity development, data collection, monitoring, analysis, and compatibility. That is data being interoperable. And then also interaction with development agency. Some of the respondents thought that that is very critical, sharing of information, and also for governments to engage in whole of society to encourage ownership. What came out of the discussion is that if society, the whole of society, doesn't take ownership to environmental management, then we continue to have, challenges. Next slide, please. And here we have some of the gaps, and these were suggestions that were offered. So for example, accessing financing. The suggestion that came out is more capacity support for developing project proposal. Many of the discussion was centered like that we know we have available resources, but we sometimes don't access these available resources because the capacity to develop project proposal is still something that is a challenge in all of the regions. Suggestion number 2, again, on accessing finances, is to explore options for results-based payment approaches to fund projects. And that should be a national effort. So we had 7 gaps with those suggestions. And these, as you see in here, deals with data collection, monitoring, human capacity, low level of information sharing. And the suggestion was, for example, we are living in a generation where people do not read, especially if we're targeting the next generation. We are living in a social media era. So it suggested that perhaps, for example, these Jeff reports, while they're very, very important, sometimes the messages get lost in these very heavy reports. So it's suggested that perhaps that these lessons learned could be developed as storyboards. So project managers or even persons who are writing proposal will be able to just go on these, for example, the IW Learn website and look at these particular storyboards. So, it helped them, given the context in which we are operating in terms of limited or not a lot of reading or heavy reading by many of our personnel and also the generation. And next slide, please. Right, and then these were some suggestions that focus specifically in IW Learn, how is it that they can support the SIDS regions. And this is IW Learn can undertake targeted capacity building activities. And what we're hoping is that some of these will come out from this meeting. IW Learn can utilize it, twinning initiative to help foster exchange and by extension build capacity. And I know that is the intention, but it was reiterated here of the importance for SIDS. And also IW Learn can create learning materials, again, such as a storyboard, and also develop accessible toolkits to support small island states. Next slide, please. Right. So, I don't know, Claudette, would you like to come in here?
This was meant for part 2, so I think you can wrap up. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
We just
So I just want to add what is it that I have recognized from this consultancy, and hoping that it is my analysis that it would perhaps shed some light on how I see the bigger picture. One of my observations, I'm going to talk just quickly about financial flow, is that we've recognized that the GEF financing is among the major source, or this major source of financing for the environment, and since its impact in promoting sustainable development remain one of the cornerstone. However, I think from sitting on the outside and looking at the flow of the budget, it really, to me, it's low. It is low comparative of when you're talking about a portfolio of about 42 countries that are small island states and receiving only 4.5% of the budget. So I think for me that's alarming, but also it's just something that that perhaps and specifically, I will talk a little bit about the international waters portfolio remains a very low funded portfolio for SIDS. And if we are talking about these countries as large ocean states, to me, I would have expected to see a lot more funding for the international waters program, especially, or access, I should say, in project manifestation of international waters, because almost all our countries in the Pacific, the AIS region, and the Caribbean in particular, are speaking of the blue economy as their new frontier for development. And it's all still remain a significantly unknown space in all our regions. And therefore, I felt that that perhaps that's a little bit alarming, that should be considered. In terms of the knowledge and information, I would say still remains very low in many of the areas. For example, land degradation, we hardly have found any literature on land degradation. But however, the infantry allow us an understanding of what is out there, and for us to support targeted program to help increase the scholarships and output. And also with regard to the hub, as you would see, we have a significant number of hub. I would suggest that we do not develop another hub, but rather try to see how we can coalesce these hubs that are all offering unique information. How is it that this can be used? And my suggestion was that IW Learn put this database on its website, so people have a one-stop shop, because a lot of times we still do searches in isolation. I do not find everything, because of what we put in. Searches are based on algorithm. So, and the stakeholder needs assessment really bring to bear some of the challenges that that small states are facing, and also some of the things that they would require. So overall, this is my presentation, and Laverne, I'll hand it over back to you, and I'll accommodate any questions if time permits. I will leave that to you.
Thank you so much, Asha. Appreciated. So we will have an opportunity for questions, but we just have one more presentation. And speaking about, well, he says it's not exactly a hub as we know it, but I would like to invite Travis Sinclair, the Program Director for the Caribbean Learning Nexus Project, which is based at the University of West Indies in Keyville campus in Barbados, who would say something about a hub that they are working on developing. So Travis, over to you.
Thank you, Laverne. And I did share a PowerPoint with Leon. Leon, could you confirm if you did receive?
Camila?
Yes, is this one that I'm sharing? right now. Can you see?
No, what you're sharing is what Asha's
Okay, look,
here.
Right. So there was a
I'm
second
sharing.
email that was sent. Thank you.
Yeah, now you can see it.
Sure. Yes. So if you
Okay,
if you can proceed. So just for context, so in 2007, actually, the government of Barbados announced a green economy policy. It was then the Minister of Finance, then Prime Minister Arthur. And out of that, we executed several elements of the policy. In 2010, UNEP approached us about undertaking a scoping study just basically to evaluate the policies from that specific instrument. Out of that, we did that scoping study, and a key recommendation was the establishment of a SIDS green economy knowledge transfer hub. And the premise really, when we engage with UNEP, is that you recall in 2012 there was that buzz around the green economy, the Rio Plus 20 conference, and a major part of the outcome, the future we want, was to look at sustainable development in the context of the green economy, in the context of poverty eradication and sustainable development. And the idea was that what we gathered from our scope and study, how to get other small island states who were interested in pursuing green, and then the blue economy was also surfacing as well. How these lessons and other lessons can be transferred through exchanges, cooperation, programs, etc. So that's where that idea was birthed. Fast forward, I think it was in Samoa Pathway, and in fact, in the Samoa Pathway, there were several things that this SIDS instrument, the third SIDS instrument, and it was the whole idea of establishing national information and communication technology hubs to support cooperation. I believe it was paragraph 109 in the Samoa Pathway. So fast forward again with UNEP in 2015, we had a discussion out of Rio Plus 20, the UN Partnership for Action on Green Economy was birthed, and out of that, Barbados was invited to the program, and that is where we proposed to undertake a feasibility study, and that's what you see here, the first bullet. That study was done in 2021. There was some political momentum that 2021 under the Forum of Ministers, and in that decision, it was called to establish a SIDS to support the establishment of a SIDS cooperation and knowledge hub. Enter the approach to the GEF, and we were able to complete a PIF, I believe, in 2023, the PPG in 2023, and that was approved in 2023. At that time, we were also negotiating the ABUS. Laverne was with ECLAC at the time, and in the St. Vincent meeting, we were able in that and in the follow-up in negotiating instruments and the final ABUS, the concept of the SIDS Green and Blue Economy Knowledge Transfer Hub was agreed to in the ABUS. And so we've spent the last couple of months now, the project has been approved. We have that political mandate. We are now beginning to execute that project. Next slide. This is basically the knowledge management context of the GEF in terms of some of the issues that were identified in that 2020 assessment, and some of the key recommendations. I'll leave the actual PowerPoint and it can be shared, but just go on. Next slide. So this is just some of the findings that were relevant to the Caribbean context. Remember the whole post-COVID-19 recovery context. And basically, as it relates to green and blue economy, there was a lot of discussion around using the recovery to stimulate green investments. Fortunately, we've fallen short. But at the time, there were these are three things: the absence of sound knowledge of successful green learning elements implemented through GEF projects, the absence of evidence-proven applications of green learning elements, and the absence of a methodology for a system for documenting successfully green solutions. As I listen to Asha and I listen to the concept of knowledge hubs and information clearinghouses, it really depends on the side of the coin, because in the project space, those involved that are involved in those stakeholders, you can look at these documents, you can review, and you can see that there are strong lessons learned, and persons generally are positioned to take those things to implement, to scale up. We post these things on a information clearinghouse and knowledge hub, and for most onlookers, it's just information. So as I say, it really depends on who you're speaking to when you begin to get in to really dissecting this concept of information and knowledge. I think that we have a large repository of information sitting on various sources, open platforms. But the challenge really is once the projects are completed, that's it. In the Caribbean, for instance, most project managers, once they complete a project, they're busy looking for that next project because the GEF portfolio provides the capacity in very human resource poor institutions, and that is what the GEF plays, that real capacity support role. So you're constantly looking for projects in terms of evaluating whether we're able to see the transformation. Unfortunately, we don't have the systems right now. Next slide. So this is just some of the opportunities, and I mentioned here some of the existing portals. OECS, for instance, had a knowledge center that was supported by the World Bank in the Ocean Crop Project. Chris is here, the regional SIDS, and I know they're doing quite a bit in terms of trying not simply to host reports, but how really to make that information and knowledge work. And then there's the Partnership Initiative on Sustainable Land Management. Asha mentioned the gaps in land, and PISLM, which was born in 2003, they actually have a soil information system driven by the countries, and they're doing some tremendous work. And this current project that I'm involved in is actually tied to that. Just next slide. So this is just a one sheet. So it's a 3-year project. We're trying to demonstrate the establishment of a SIDS Green and Blue Economy Knowledge Transfer Hub. The executing agency is the University of the West Indies, Cayfield campus. So 1.78 million for financing of 3.5. And you see it's in the left land degradation portfolio, and that's the reference to the project. Next slide. This is, we're just trying to put the architecture of the project, but the project basically surrounds an ICT platform, what I call an intellectual platform. And the third layer is a cooperation framework among partner institutions. And the cooperation framework involves a number of partners that came on board, driven by PAGE itself, UN PAGE. I mentioned that constitutes 5 agencies. We have UN DESA, we have the CARICOM Secretariat, we have the OECS, and we then have a number of NGOs like Caribbean Youth Environment Network. They will form within that cooperation platform. The intellectual platform I mentioned is that there is a science and technical group that will be a big part of the knowledge extraction and transformation. The intent is to have these in this first going to have these the knowledge extracted be mainstream in tertiary education, hence the University of the West Indies. The ICT infrastructure That again will be resting with the University of the West Indies, but tied very closely to a number of portals and hubs within the CARICOM Secretariat, the OECS. We also have, as I mentioned, the Partnership Initiative for Sustainable Land Management and the Jeff Islands, the Trinidad base led by Joel Batchersing, who again, lots of knowledge and communication products, but as Joel pointed out, in terms of look at the how they're utilized, they're not there. As I said, I will leave this with you. Next slide. Just quickly, these are some of the components and outputs in this case, and some of the targets in terms of the key results that we will be going after. This really speaks to the ICT solution and the agreements among the agencies, and then on establishing a number of nodes. Next slide, component 2. This is really the extraction of base. I think that there's a database of 100 and I think 19 projects. I think there were we would have looked at, of those, 55 national, 22 regional in the first going, and there is we look from as far back as Jeff 2 up to Jeff 7, and these are the ones that are relevant to the focal areas in terms of land degradation, issues pertaining to ecosystems restoration, green and blue innovations, etc. But the idea is to pilot the design programs and pilot these things at the university level, but also we'll be working with, as I mentioned, the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. Interestingly, the pilot ambassadorial knowledge transfer initiatives tied to this, and the idea is that we have a number of new persons coming into the negotiating space in the Caribbean from universities, etc. And how do we utilize the knowledge extracted and those persons that are involved in the political aspects of multilateral environmental agreements to establish that initiative. And component 3 is basically the marketplace, basically getting this out. Next slide. So basically hosting a number of events, and we will be looking at those over the next year. Next should be the project governance. This is a project governance. You can see here the university has 2 reps, the Institute of Gender Studies, the governments of Grenada and Barbados. Those are the 2 sponsoring countries. CARICOM Secretariat, OECS, and UNEP, Chris again, and the Peace Secretariat. UNITAR, one of our key sponsors, UNDESA, and then PISLIN, the CYN, and the Regional Private Sector Organization. So with that, I believe that finishes up. So the next, at the bottom of this slide, you will just see the project governance, project management mechanism. Next. And I want to say thank you. I know, listen, I had to rush because I do have a 12-year-old waiting for me at the end of the school day. But I can spend probably another 5 minutes before I have to go. Laverne, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Travis. So colleagues, now is the opportunity if you have any questions, comments in relation to the presentations done by Travis and Asha. Now is the time to take the floor and to ask. So I see Claudette. Yes.
Hi. Well, thank you very much, both Asha and Travis, and of course Laverne for your presentations. I have a quick question for Travis. I caught the information that your project is under the focal area land degradation, which is kind of good news to us because the scope of the SIDS component under IW Learn goes beyond IW, and it should go across the 5 focal areas. So I think that's in itself is already positive and encouraging. But then I was just wondering, since part of the scope is blue economy, Do you also relate or somehow refer to international waters and what is being produced under international waters portfolio?
Hi. So just to answer directly, not specifically coded like that, but certainly in terms of blue economy and land is interesting for a small island state, as you know, that's where we live, play, recreate. That's where our economies are based. So it actually will touch a number of marine coastal issues. Many of the projects in the Caribbean, as you would know, do relate to the marine space. So in that context, there is that strong synergy, while not specifically mentioning the international waters portfolio.
Thank you, Travis and Claudette. Chris?
Thanks, Laverne, and thanks again, Asha. Good seeing you again. And maybe this is more of a comment for Travis, just as he's leaving and planting a seed. Travis, about maybe a couple of years ago, Anthony, Mr. Headley, our focal point in Barbados, had actually broached the idea that wouldn't it be interesting for UWI to serve as a sort of information regional activity center for us as a secretariat. We actually have in other regional SIDS programs, in addition to technical regional activity centers, there are sometimes centers that focus primarily on knowledge management. And if this goes, as I sure it will go well, there is potentially this discussion that we can take up. If this can evolve to have UE serving maybe together with another Spanish-speaking organization as a center of knowledge for in support of the work that we do as a convention, I think that would be great. So just more of a comment. And then secondly, Asha, I wondered in your analysis, and maybe I'm gonna sort of call the elephant in the room, SIDS may have received less resources, in particular under international waters, but in all of the SIDS projects that we've been engaged in, there has been a significant challenge in implementation capacity, especially within governments. And I wonder if it's also time for us to sort of think outside the box in terms of how we actually implement some of these projects on the ground. Because I hate to say, even if we had more money, I'm not convinced that we'd have the transformation and impact, especially if we have to work through government ministries. So just again, maybe a comment or observation, or if you got a sense of any of that in your interactions with governments. Thanks. Over.
Asha, I don't know if you are able to respond,
Yes.
but I
Laverne,
think
can
this.
Yes, can I just add here?
Sure.
Chris, lovely to see you again. Travis, I know you're running out, and I know when you started your presentation, you spoke of Asha saying no hub. What I was trying to allude to is that my recommendation would be that one of the reasons that we looked at all this information was for the IW Learn to develop a SIDS hub. And in my opinion, we don't need an IW Learn SIDS hub, especially when they're doing all of this work. But not that we don't need another hub. There's so many gaps around, but somewhere we have to serve as a one-stop shop. And I think SIDS, that would be my recommendation for the IW Learn initiative, that they be a one-stop shop, and they already gathered so much information. Chris, yes, that is the big elephant in the room. And the other elephant in the room is that often we talked about financing, and I mentioned briefly in it that we talk, we don't have money, or it's very easy that when we look at our challenges, we said lack of financing. But is it lack of access to financing, or is it that there's a lack of available financing? And I think that there is a difference. And this is where Chris, we're talking about the hardship or the challenges for implementing projects. So one could argue there is not a tremendous, there are lots of money out there. I mean, currently we're doing a small study on tracking financing to small states that would evolve into a paper for publication. And what we're seeing is that there are a lot of available financing. The challenge is that how much we are accessing it. And again, it boils down to your point, Chris, the challenges that is encountered perhaps at the at the government level and meeting the actual stakeholders and the impact. I hope that I've added anything there, but I know that this is something we all have agreed on many years ago.
Thank you, Asha. Thank you. And I think just to say that I recall when we did have the thematic group discussions in Uruguay, and I did have it in my presentation that there was suggestions to increase that Jeff needs to focus more on capacity development for government agencies, because I think there was some concern that the government agencies are not necessarily do not have sufficient capacity to ensure long-term sustainability of projects, or even to, as Chris indicated, implement projects. There was also, I mean, in another world, there was also, I recall hearing the suggestion for we need to do more than just build the capacity of the government agencies, but to build long-term, I guess, institutional capacity, because building the capacity means that you build capacity, but then people leave and then you lose the capacity. But it needs to be something that's more sustainable. So the actual institutional capacity of the organization needs to be focused on to ensure, that it continues over time and that we do not lose. Because I think in SIDS that there is a general turnover, and I think that was something that was discussed by colleagues from the Pacific as well when they were doing their presentations in Uruguay. So just sharing that. I saw that there was a comment in the chat, and I see Asha, please go ahead.
Yes,
Yes.
I just want to jump in here, Laverne, just to keep the conversation going with regard to capacity building. What I've seen in my years now of doing a bit more work at the government level, we have not prioritized proposal writing. So while there isn't much capacity, because we know one person is doing many jobs, we have not really prioritized at the institutional prioritization to really access funding. I mean, writing this proposal is not for the faint-hearted. And I think you have to be able to have in each of your organization a core group that really do look at this funding and see how is it that we can go after it. And I am yet to see that being prioritized within the government sector.
Thank you. I see we've lost many people, but Travis, please go ahead.
Sure, yeah, yes. So thanks a lot, and I have to run, but I also think back to that finance issue, and also for institutions like the Jeff, it is very difficult for persons to wrap, I believe, their heads around the challenges of a small and developing state, unless you're of a small and developing state. And I give the example of data. Everybody wants data and statistics. There are some states in the Caribbean that have statistical units of what, nearly 200. There are some that have 6. They're doing the same thing that an entity, be it a UK or a US, So when we talk about capacity support, there are layers to capacity support. Finance comes in because these countries are also, they've been graduated. They do not have the space for staff, for training, for equipment. So I think in terms of the Jeff partnership, one of the things is that you need to put together I don't want to use the word complex, but multifaceted capacity support program. It's not just training. I think also in terms of how projects are programmed, where a project is approved and it's literally day from time it's approved is day one. Those things, to get those projects going, require a number of systems within government. Sometimes those things can take 12 to 24 months. So there is an empathy that is required for small island states, but the international system, if you really want to change the game. And I said it needs a multifaceted approach. Thank you very much, Claudette. It was a pleasure being here, and looking forward to collaborate for everyone.
Thank you very much for joining. Thanks for the presentation. I will be in touch.
Thank you. So colleagues, we can move to step 2. I know there are not as many of us that started the call, but planning for 2025. I don't know, Claudette, over to you. I think we've already somewhat started identifying some priority areas regarding where we may wish to focus on from the previous discussion. But yes, over to you to lead us on the discussion.
Thank you very much, Laverne. I see Asha still has a hand raised.
Well,
I don't know if you wanted to come in or if that's an old one
I think that was
before
an
we
old
move
one.
on.
Sorry, it's a legacy hand. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so the objective of this second part is very much to move ahead, to make the next steps with respect to the planning of activities for next year, based on the outcomes of this assessment, the survey, the workshop, etc., as well as the discussions we're having now. And try to map any, let's say, opportunities that we see both in the Caribbean as well as in the Pacific region on the shorter term. And with that, try to start planning at the inception, the very first steps of planning training workshops, as well as to narrow down the topic, the focus that this training workshop should have in the different regions. I did get the kind of the request made earlier in the introduction on the twinning. It seems like some of the, which is another activity that we have in the pipeline, some of the people here were not sure, thought that the twinning exchange is a good opportunity, but were not sure how to go about that. Maybe I will start with that first, on the twinning program, which essentially was already launched at the IWC, so in September, and in principle, our deadline was the 15th of November. So the deadline for the first stage, which was essentially we were asking for the submission of expression of interest. So for us to get a first idea of how many people, institutes, partners are interested in a twinning exchange, and to see whether we could help also in doing the matchmaking. If it helps, I would just walk you through like a short live demo, just to say that we do have a separate twinning budget for SIDS, which is even bigger than the general twinning program, and therefore we will be happy to accept some more expression of interest and eventually proposals that focus on SIDS. So even though the deadline in principle passed, we will make allowance for additional expressions of interest to come in, let's say, in the next days by the end of November. For those of you who are interested in the twinning, so what we ask for at this stage is to go, let's go from the start to the IW Learn website, to go to services, then to go to twinning. There you can you have some additional information of what we mean by twinning, what we mean by iterative twinning, what we mean by ad hoc, so just one exchange, etc., etc. the rules and regulations and some questions about the twinning program in this phase of IW Learn, and then how to use the twinning portal. So essentially, in a few words, we are now in step 1, which is the submission of expression of interest, which would mean that anyone who is interested in a twinning, whether they identify themselves as the knowledge requester or the knowledge donor, would have to fill in one of these 2 forms. This is for the knowledge requester. Here you fill in very basic information. It's not the proposal, it's just an expression of interest, and a similar form if you are the donor. And if you would do that, then you would appear here in the, let's call it the partner database. This is the list of expression of interest that we have received so far. And you can see some of them do come from SIDS regions. So even if you don't have a twinning partner yet, this is not a problem at this stage. You just identify in the form that you are still looking for a partner, or you can even take a look at this list here to see whether you can find your partner from this list. So given that I could at least I had the impression in the beginning that this is still potentially interesting for SIDS partners. I think we will inform that we can extend the deadline for this first phase by a couple of days to give the opportunity for those of you who are interested in this exchange to fill in this form at this stage. And of course, if you have any other questions, to get back to us. So that was one thing, but going back to the training workshops and seeing that we have, I think most of the people that are still on the call are, yeah, I would say Caribbean, not even. But yeah, we do have some from Pacific, so feel free to just come in. Could we be a bit more concrete on a potential training workshop, let's say in Caribbean or in the Pacific in the coming year? What would be the key topic, or let's say the key opportunity that we can combine it with? If I summarize the discussion we had so far, I think what I gather is this lack of capacity with respect to financing and accessing financing, which then it could be also the next step, also capacity in writing proposal and institutional capacity and long-term capacity. And then that the next step would be also the management eventually, if there is a project, the actual management. This for me could be, let's say, identified as one potential topic that we can focus on and try to organize a training workshop on these lines. I just wanted to almost to get some validation of the results from this assessment that we've been carrying out, whether you think this is going in the right direction or whether you think we should put focus on one or two of these topics that we have been investigating. So I actually put back the question back to you. Assuming that Alpha's hand is an old one, then I see Chris has a hand raised.
Thanks, and I'll use the opportunity just to reply to you. So I think that remains a high priority for SIDS, but I like how you phrase it, because it both touches upon what Asha mentioned. It's a broad area of resource mobilization, which talks about understanding the donor landscape, being able to determine the access to the funding, and then how to go about the actual proposal writing. But I wanted to touch on the proposal writing, and maybe this is a challenge to my good friend Isabel. On the earlier projects that we've been involved with IW, in particular, I recall our Jeff IW CAM project for SIDS, we actually had 2 very comprehensive proposal development training, and that was built into the project. But it's obvious that it's not enough. And it seems that it continues to be a call and a need. And I'm wondering then, maybe when we design some further IW project, we try to find a way of how are we actually going to institutionalize proposal writing, because it's a recurrent theme. And even though we have tried to address it through some of our projects, it's been not enough. And that's what comes to mind. So it's not saying that I don't think we need it, and I think it could be a focus of this training, but I am concerned about the sustainability, because we train persons and they turn into professional consultants and they don't actually go back and work, or they work for the UN and they don't actually end up with a sustained capacity within the government agency. So just an observation. Over.
Thank you, Chris. So if I understand correctly, previously, was it part of IW Learn that IW Learn was
done under it was done under one of our projects. We actually built it in as a project activity, one of the IW projects, and we actually allocated funds. We trained all the project beneficiaries in proposal writing, and and I'm sure there have been other regional projects that have built in proposal writing as an activity, but it's still a need. So it means either the capacity is not being kept, or the conditions of proposal writing are changing, and people are now not as comfortable in how to write a proposal for Green Climate Fund or for another or philanthropic donor. I don't know. So I think it's a continuous need, but I'm just wondering how can we better institutionalize it? Maybe there's a role for IW Learn in actually leaving a bit of a legacy with SIDS, so that it's not just another one-off training exercise. Over.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Can I come in here?
Yes, please. Your hand is
Yes,
up.
I'm glad Chris raised that point, because we have to understand financing from this very different components that all must come together to be comprehensive. And I was wondering, Chris, that those training programs that you're referring to, why don't we take that? Well, when I said we, I mean IW Learn, take that same material and adapt it into a train the trainers, and that is something that can be recurring on the IW website if they're going to be, they already have an established website. So I think that those could be packaged, so that anyone who wants to learn about proposal writing, that they can benefit from those training. Secondly, sometimes these people that you would have trained under the IWCAM, it's not that they've left it, they've just gone up in the different departments in the organization, and they no longer have to write proposals. So they bring in the younger or new staff that need that skill set, and there is nobody to train them in that skill set, because obviously they're very stretched. So I think we have to understand the context and also find an innovative way. And I think a train the trainers component would be very useful, and hoping that the material that is developed, that it is comprehensive enough. And this is not something that that is new. Many countries are embracing this train the trainer concept. We have just done a comprehensive training for climate change adaptation in the Bahamas, and now the courses are taken up by the University of the Bahamas. So I think one of the key things here that perhaps that might be useful is for us to understand the partners in the region, and how is it that you can get that ownership. And I'm thinking, hearing Travis's presentation, we also have many University of the West Indies, many local universities, many open campuses out of the University of the West Indies, and I'm talking specifically to the Caribbean, that can actually come on board with this proposal writing, because it's just not only the technical people are struggling with proposal writing, even in the academic, where, attracting funding is still a challenge for many professors. So I think it's something that will be very welcome across the board.
Thank you, Asha. I would like to essentially to pose the same question to the participants from Pacific. So, for instance, Rosanna, I don't know, sorry to put you on the spot, whether this topic would also be applicable would also resonate, whether you see the same need when working in the Pacific, or whether you would think other topics should take priority.
I mean, I tend to agree with the comments that have been made about the importance of institutionalizing capacity. We do have a range of projects, particularly GCF readiness, for example, where we have these 1 to 2 day events on proposal writing, and we build the individual capacity of government staff and proposal development. And it doesn't seem to become sustainable and embedded within the institutions. So people become elevated to certain positions within government, as has already been mentioned, and are no longer involved in proposal writing, or become consultants or move to other parts of the Pacific. So I think these trainings can be useful, but there needs to be more of an institutionalization of the capacity. So, I mean, we continue to do these trainings, but I mean, another consideration is also the time constraints of the very limited staff that that government institutions have. And so, we build capacity in proposal writing, but then they're also working on 10 other things that, in other countries you might have staff dedicating 100% of their time to particular deliverables, but then in the Pacific, people are working on 10 different things that one person would be working on in other more resourced countries. So I think there's a financial aspect to that as well, the number of personnel within these institutions. So I think there's a deeper discussion about system level capacity building that needs to be had. So these one-off capacity building events are useful, but this needs to be underpinned by more foundational capacity building.
Which would link then maybe to the training of trainers, I guess, as one way to have more institutional capacity building, so that you're not just, I mean, you're leaving behind people that are able to pass this over. So maybe that's the way to think about it. In terms of other thematics, so you might recall Asha's graphs with the different themes that we put forward, both on the survey and in other ways in the assessment. Is there a thematic that you think it stands out where we should put particular attention? So I recall, for instance, transboundary governance was one that scored quite high. Do you think this is needed? Do you think, I mean, IWLearn will be adding to the landscape of what is already available?
I think Chris had his hand up, but I do recall Sonia also indicated that she was also interested in learning more about the whole issue of blue carbon. It's a new area that's coming up, and she thought that there are opportunities for. But Chris, over. I mean, sorry.
Yeah. And sorry for taking the floor again, but I actually had to run to another film. I'm going to make this. So I wondered, Claudette, in the training which we need, and which of course is very much needed by all SIDS, it almost seems to be a mixture of slightly different things. I would definitely agree on the proposal. Writing a train of trainers approach, I think, is probably a more cost-effective way of doing it. The whole idea about some of these emerging issues and opportunities, like a blue carbon, I think is very relevant. But then I also think of something like a transboundary governance or oceans governance, but in the context more of something like stakeholder management or conflict resolution or something very practical that our SIDS stakeholders have to do in a SIDS context. And part of that is managing expectations from 3 or 4 or 5 different stakeholders on the use of a very small piece of land or sea. I know marine spatial planning might to some degree touch upon that, and maybe the training that we hope to do collectively on marine spatial planning is one. But I think it was Asha who mentioned it in her presentation. Part of the challenge for a number of the executing agencies and the projects is actually telling the story in an effective way. So we have our experience notes, we have the videos that we show at the IW conferences, but but in a lot of cases we are contracting out consultants and expert people. But I'm wondering, is there a need for a capacity building that focuses a lot on messaging and pulling together the best practices and the experience, but not in the typical way like we've done it in a 10 technical report or an experience note, but something that's visual, friendly, sharp, and is really now targeted to local stakeholders. So those are just my random ideas. I know we can't do everything, but hopefully that contribution is useful. Over.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we have other components and other activities that are planned around effective communication and storytelling, which are more broader. I mean, not just specifically focusing on SIDS or targeting SIDS projects, but more the portfolio in general. But this is definitely something that is a need for all projects. And we've also seen from the feedback that we got from the pre-conference workshops on project management, that we should also do more of it and include other aspects that are required for effective management of IW projects, and part of its stakeholder engagement, conflicts, and whatever. So it can be even broader, including many of the topics you mentioned. So these have already been identified as real needs, I would say, for the general portfolio, but probably with some specificities for the SIDS projects, because of what we've been saying, the issue of capacities and time, etc. Seeing the time, and I know other people might have to move on to other meetings. I think we're getting close to the 90 minute mark that we put. I took some useful inputs here. I think there is some food for thought for our next activities. We'll be still interested to map opportunities, so like any events coming up that would already bring together the stakeholders or the partners, we would be interested to know about them, so that would also help us in the actual planning of the activities. So if you come across anything that you think would be relevant for us to know, feel free to pass it on. With that, I don't think we need a very lengthy closing and wrap up. I think we had the opportunity to share with you what came out of the workshop, as well as to have a discussion of what is coming up next. Unless somebody else would like to come in, has any comments? We see Isabel.
Yeah, you made it.
Yes.
I had to escape and borrow headsets and Anyway, I just wanted to, sorry, I couldn't be more active. Attending 2 meetings is never the best thing to be active. But I really appreciate the SIDS Connect. I think more of us should connect. There's certainly a huge portfolio in SIDS financed by Jeff International Waters and other focal areas. So we need to take advantage of this, and we need to connect more often and to learn from one another, from one project to the other, but also from a region to the other. So I would encourage those who are still on the call to take advantage of the IW Learn opportunity, either to be actively involved in the SIDS component of the project, but also to take advantage of the twinning. And the SIDS are truly incubators. They're incubators for policy coherence. They're incubators from source to sea. So they have a lot to share even with the wider JEF project community in international waters and across focal areas. When we talk about a hub, I also wanted to reflect on the fact that many of the JEF projects in international waters in SIDS actually do have to put up or prepare a hub. And I'll mention a few. In the Caribbean, there is the Car Bluefin, and it has to do a hub on blue financing. The Plastic Black Cities has to do the hub on circular economy solutions for plastic pollution. The project that we are about to start in the Pacific on sustainable blue economy will do a hub on sustainable blue economy. I am sure that SPC SOPAC, if they're still on the call, have also a few hubs to share. There is also the SIDS Docs, and the SIDS Docs has also a learning platform and a hub of some sorts, right? We heard the OECS as a hub, CARICOM might have one, ProCaribe is also looking into creating a hub. So I would encourage that through IW Learn, we take advantage of all those hubs and create a hub of hub or platform of platform, like we've been discussing with the wider IW Learn community when it comes to the DIB. So those are just my few reflections. I think it's a great community, and I'm sure that will be many more of us actively engaged on the SIDS Connect at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. And thank you for those who did manage to stay till the end. And I think, Claudette, thank you as well to you and Maria Camila for your assistance, as well as Asher for your interesting presentation. And with that, I think we can close the webinar. So have a good evening and day to everyone. Thanks all.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Laverne. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Ciao. Bye-bye. So